December 7th, 1977, Saitama Prefecture. Harada and Okubo, two local firemen, were making their rounds inspecting the fire water tanks around the area. It was another cold night, and as they approached one of the tanks, they blew on their hands to warm them up before slowly pulling open the heavy concrete lid. As soon as it slid open, they were overcome with an overpowering stench of rot. They quickly took out their flashlights and shone it into the darkness. They peered inside and saw something moving slightly, floating on the surface of the water. It looked like cloth, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was long black hair. They took a stick and stirred the water a bit. Something white and resembling an arm came into view. A moment later, they saw what resembled a face. It was barely recognizable because the flesh was completely rotten and looked like it was melting off the bone. The two men turned towards each other in shock. They ran to the closest house and called the police. Once they got there, they pulled the body up. It must have been there for a while because it was completely putrefied that the head and torso fell apart due to the weight of the body. Harada said in an interview for the Asahi newspaper, "I thought someone had played a prank and thrown in some old clothes in the tank. We couldn't leave it in the tank and risk the water to get clogged, so we took a stick to try to fish them out. I was in complete shock when I realized it was a dead body. Gave me shivers down my spine." An autopsy was carried out by the assistant professor of the Tokyo Medical and Dental University, and the following characteristics were determined. Number 1. Sex, female. Number 2. Age, late teens to early 20s. Number 3. Height, about 155 centimeters or 5'1". Number 4. Clothes, navy blue high-neck sweater and a grey skirt. Number 5. Evidence of dental work on back molars. Unfortunately, due to the advanced decomposition of the body, the cause of death could not be determined. Not only that, but facial reconstruction was impossible and no fingerprints could be taken. As a result, the only thing the police could use to try to identify the young woman was with her dental records and the shoes she was wearing at the time of death. These shoes were discovered with the body, and luckily, the brand was still visible. They were from a store called Cattleya. The police went to 33 different dentists in the Chichibu area and finally found the dentist that worked on the victim's teeth. Additional information on the victim was also gathered through her clothes and shoes, and the body was finally identified. Once the identification was made, the police looked at people connected to her and came across a person of interest. His name was Tamura, and he was dating the victim at the time of her disappearance. While the police were questioning him, he confessed to murdering his then-girlfriend and was quickly arrested. According to him, they met 3 years prior, in 1974, when her friend introduced the two of them to each other. They started dating, but it wasn't long before she became pregnant. She apparently talked to him about getting married, but Tamura himself was not sure and kept dodging the situation. Soon, she was 6 months pregnant and too far along to have an abortion. This didn't sit well with Tamura. His pregnant girlfriend became a nuisance to him, and on November 8, 1975, he asked her out on a date and took her to a river. Once there, an argument ensued. "I want to have the baby." "No, get an abortion." There was obviously not going to be any happy ending here. Tamura lost his mind at this point and strangled his pregnant girlfriend to death and tossed her and their unborn baby into a water tank. Even to this day, there are countless murders where lovers end up killing each other. So why did the media outlets go crazy when they heard about the discovery of this body? What made this case so special? Allow me to explain. More than a year before the body was discovered, there were numerous stories about ghost sightings in this area. Many of them describe very similar experiences where a woman would appear in their headlights, and when they hit the brakes, she would disappear. It was such a common occurrence that about a week prior to the body's discovery, on around December 1st, someone had written, There's a ghost here with a chalk on a rock near where the body was dumped. The locals swore that the rock was moving closer to the tank every day, even though it was quite a sizable rock, maybe one that an adult man can carry if he was extremely strong. Now this is a rumor and it cannot be confirmed, but it adds to the overall strange occurrences in the area. The news quickly spread, and soon after the body's discovery, many people began to share their own experiences. One taxi driver recounts his experience. He was driving close to Eifukuji Temple in Saitama late one night when a woman hunched over on the side of the road came into view ahead of him. He immediately felt a bit creeped out to see this woman all by herself so late at night, but stopped the car to ask if she needed any help. He slowly approached her and called out, "Hey miss, are you okay?" He let out a scream when she slowly lifted her head. Her flesh looked like it was rotting off of her face, and he could see that she was in great agony. He ran back to the taxi, and once inside, he looked for the woman again, but she was nowhere to be seen. The melted face is one similarity across many of these witnesses, but there's one more characteristic about this ghost that makes everyone believe that she is in fact the ghost of the woman that was murdered. And this characteristic is that she is seen to be wearing a black sweater. This is significant because when the body was discovered, she was in fact wearing a navy blue sweater, which can easily be mistaken for a black one, especially at night. So here's a story about the woman in the black sweater, one that occurred before her body was found. A man was driving near the area where the body was dumped when he saw someone in his headlights. As he got closer, he could see that it was a woman wearing a black sweater. She seemed to be standing on the lid of the water tank, looking down at her feet. The man mumbled to himself, "Why is she standing there like that so late at night?" And as he spoke those words, his gut told him something was off about this woman. It occurred to him that she was wearing a sweater even though it was in the middle of summer and stifling hot outside. He immediately felt a chill, and his car had already traveled some distance by this time, and the woman was getting closer. He drove past her and nothing happened, and he sighed a sigh of relief. When he glanced in his back mirror, she had disappeared. In addition to the above encounters, people heard a woman crying when they passed the water tank. There's a cemetery and a temple close by, which makes the entire place a bit ominous, so needless to say, this stretch of road became notorious after numerous ghost sightings. 3 years after her murder and a year after her body's discovery, these stories kept coming. Why was her ghost still being seen when her body had already been recovered? That's when this article was published in a magazine explaining that only her body had been returned to the family and not her head. The speculation was that her soul couldn't cross over because she wanted her entire body to be sent back to her family. Furthermore, a tiny bone fragment was also found. It is believed to be that of her unborn child, so some say that she's still roaming this earth, wanting to be reunited with her baby. 27 years later, on August 10, 2005, this case is brought back into the light when a popular TV show picked it up on one of their summer episodes. In this episode, the reporter goes to the place where the body was discovered and pays his respect by laying some incense and flowers. By this time, the water tank had been buried and doesn't exist anymore, but a few remnants of its cement lid were still present. The reporter was then supposed to go to the family's home for an interview. However, something strange happens after this. They put the home address of their house into the navigation system, but where they should have been turning left, the system would tell them to turn right. Thinking it strange, they continue to follow the route and they eventually arrive at a cemetery. This cemetery is where the woman was laid to rest. They tried to get to the family home from several different directions, but no matter which road they took, they always ended up at the cemetery. How can anyone explain this occurrence? It's common for people to see ghosts or experience other paranormal activities after a horrible accident or murder. However, this case was different in that numerous people witnessed a woman's ghost in the same place for over a year before her body was actually discovered. There are many questions that will never be answered, ones that will leave us wondering whether the body's discovery in itself was aided by her. Apparently, a body sinks after being in the water for 2 years, but for some reason, when the two firemen slid open the heavy concrete lid on the water tank, it was at the surface. Was it just a coincidence? And why was it moving when there was no water movement at all? Not to mention that there were many inspections done in the 2-year time frame, and this water tank had been checked several times during that time span. However, this was the first time the body was discovered. It's understandable that her soul couldn't rest. It's understandable that she was still roaming this earth waiting for somebody to finally find her body. For those of us who believe in ghosts, it's no mystery why her soul might still be here even to this day. The 21-year-old young mother-to-be was happy with her life and couldn't wait to welcome her unborn child. Before she met her untimely death, she had started to knit a sweater for her baby. But the two of them were murdered, their lives cut way too short, their future robbed, all because of a selfish man who couldn't accept any responsibility. I pray for her and her baby, and may they rest in peace. I'm a uni student and live alone in an apartment, and a friend of mine, Daichi, also lives in the same complex. He's on the ground floor, and I'm up on the third. One day, Daichi, 2 of our other friends from uni, and I were all hanging out at my place drinking. It was around 2 a.m. and we were slowly running out of things to talk about when someone said, "Let's tell scary stories." Now, I love telling scary stories, and every time I came across a new one, I'd add it to my repertoire to tell my friends on a rainy day. That night was the same. We turned off all the lights, and I was the one talking the whole time. After a while, I didn't have any more new stories to add when Daichi said, "I have one." After talking the whole time, I wish he'd spoken up a bit sooner. But here's what he told us. During spring break, he was texting with his girlfriend. Don't know what they were talking about, just boyfriend-girlfriend stuff, I guess. But when he looked at the time, he realized it was already 2 a.m. He got ready for bed and figured he'd just fall asleep while texting his girlfriend. Then all of a sudden, he heard loud banging on his door. Not the light knocking one hears when one's in the toilet, for example. This was hard banging with the fist type of knocking. He jumped from the sudden loud noise, and just as he was about to climb out of his futon to see who it was, he heard a woman's hysteric voice from the other side. "Help! Hurry up! Hurry up and open the door! Help! Help!" She sounded apeshit crazy and continued to bang on the door while screaming at the top of her lungs. Daichi got really worried whether he'd actually lock the door or not, but he couldn't move at this point. He was frozen in fear. Seeing his face while telling this story, I could tell that this was a real experience that had scared him pretty good. The rest of us just sat silently and listened. The entire time he couldn't move, the woman kept banging and screaming through the door. He was barely breathing, praying that this woman would think that no one was home and would eventually go away. At the same time, he was hoping that his girlfriend wouldn't text him back because his phone wasn't on silent mode. He kept repeating in his head, "Don't text back, don't text back, don't." Then, all of a sudden, the banging and yelling stopped. It was still spring and the air was chilly, but Daichi was covered in sweat. He sighed a huge sigh of relief, and he was about to call his girlfriend to tell her what just happened when he heard it. He slowly closed his phone again. He could hear the footsteps from outside his window. Now, I've been to his room many times. He sets up his futon parallel to the window, so he has the window to his left side and the rest of the room to his right. And outside his window, there's gravel. So it basically means that someone had come around and was walking right outside his window. Daichi continued. Just a few seconds ago, he was sweating profusely, but when he realized someone was making their way towards his window, he felt his sweat get reabsorbed and he was suddenly shaking. He went completely rigid and didn't move. He could hear the footsteps getting closer. Shit. The footsteps stopped right outside. There was only a window and his curtains standing in between him and this person. Daichi didn't try to take a look outside, but he could tell. He could tell that this person was trying to peek into his room. He remained curled up under the blankets. He didn't move a muscle and he didn't breathe. He prayed once again that his phone wouldn't go off because he seriously thought that if this person knew he was there, that he might get murdered. Might seem a bit far-fetched, but apparently that's all he could think about at that exact moment. Go away, go away. He shut his eyes tight. When he opened them again, it was morning. He felt like the entire thing was a bad dream. He had breakfast as normal and got ready for uni. As he was about to head out the door, he decided to check something. He opened the curtains to check outside the window, and there it was. A huge handprint which looked like it belonged to a man, and clear footprints in the gravel. This is Daichi's story. I live in the same apartment, so this one scared the shit out of me.